There are phone calls. And then there are the kinds of phone calls that change the temperature in a Hollywood studio. The kind that make executives sit up straight. The kind that make assistants mute themselves because they can't believe what they're hearing. The kind that leak. The kind that trend. The kind that rewrite careers. This is one of those calls. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because according to insiders close to Amazon MGM Studios, director Jason Orley picked up his phone one evening expecting a routine update about the upcoming ensemble comedy Close Personal Friends, only to hear a voice he didn't expect. A voice that came in confident, direct, impossibly calm. Meghan Markle had dialed in. That alone was unusual. But what she said next, what she demanded next, that was the moment Orley realized his movie had just become something very different from the project he signed on to. And this isn't rumor. This isn't vague whispering. This is a moment that multiple studio staffers have described as unsettling, unexpected, and absolutely not normal protocol. It's the moment when Meghan Markle, making her long-awaited return to acting after years outside the Hollywood machine, allegedly told Jason Orley she needed him to do something for her. Something big, something unprecedented, something that no director wants to hear from anyone, let alone someone not yet attached to the film. She wanted Prince Harry in the movie, not in the background, not as a cameo shot at a charity event, not as a fun little Easter egg for audiences to point at. She wanted him included. Included. But before we get to that demand, before we get to Meghan's alleged tone, before we get to what Jason Orley revealed after the call ended, we need to rewind. Because nothing about this moment makes sense unless we understand the pressure building underneath it. Let me ask you something. How often does a royal, former royal or otherwise, end up in a Hollywood comedy? How often does a major streaming studio suddenly have to deal with a request that mixes monarchy, celebrity, and artistic vision? How often do the worlds of royal protocol and Hollywood improv collide? Almost never. Which is exactly why this moment matters right now, at this exact second in Meghan Markle's career. Because Close Personal Friends wasn't just supposed to be another movie. It wasn't just another audition. It wasn't just another opportunity. For Meghan, this film represented something deeper, something emotional, something personal, a return, a reinvention, a reclamation of identity after years of turbulence. And because of that, the stakes were high, higher than anyone expected. Maybe higher than even Meghan realized. But let's go back to the moment the phone rang. Picture Jason Orley, the director known for his grounded comedic style, someone who works best when actors surrender to the story rather than the spotlight. A man who rarely lets fame overshadow character. He's in his home office, the script scattered across his desk, notes scribbled in margins, a cup of cold coffee beside him. He sees the incoming call and pauses. Not a number he recognizes. Not an agent's line. Not Amazon's executive suite caller ID. Just a simple, direct connection. He picks up. "Hello," he says. And then comes the voice. "Jason? Hi. It's Meghan." Meghan. Not Meghan Markle. Not the Duchess of Sussex. Just Meghan. Confident. Familiar. As if this call were expected. But he wasn't expecting it. And neither was the studio. Let me ask you, as someone watching this unfold, what would you do if you were in his shoes? What would you say if one of the most talked about public figures in the world suddenly called you out of nowhere? Would you try to sound calm? Would you panic? Would you worry this call could derail months of planning? Or would you feel a spark of opportunity, knowing this movie just became the center of global attention? Because here's the contradiction at the core of this story. Meghan Markle's name brings power, publicity, and interest. But it also brings public scrutiny, media storms, and behind-the-scenes caution from every corporation on Earth. She is the kind of figure who can elevate a project and complicate it in equal measure. And it's that contradiction that immediately filled the room when Jason took her call. Meghan wasn't calling to introduce herself. She wasn't calling to say she admired his work. She wasn't calling to ask politely about scheduling or availability. She was calling with purpose. She was calling with something she wanted. She was calling because, according to the insiders who later heard Orley recount the moment, she believed she had something to offer the film that was bigger than just a performance. She wanted to shape it, guide it, influence it. And the first step was convincing Jason Orley to trust her vision. This brings us to the second shock of the night. Why Meghan believed she needed Harry in the film. Because here's where the story takes a turn. According to sources familiar with the conversation, Meghan didn't present this as a casual idea. She framed it as something necessary, something important to her, something that aligned with both her personal evolution and the story Amazon was telling. She said she and Harry operate as a team now. She said their public image works best when presented together. She said including him would enhance the authenticity of the narrative themes in close personal friends. But what themes? What authenticity? This is a scripted comedy, not a docu-series. There was no role written for Prince Harry. No outline involving anything remotely connected to the royal world. No character that could be seamlessly replaced with one that looks like a former duke. And yet Meghan insisted. Why? That question is at the heart of this introduction. Because if Meghan wanted to come back, there were easier ways to achieve it. Smaller roles, simpler scripts, projects that didn't require negotiating with a global corporation, bending a director's creative boundaries, or rewriting a film's established tone. So why Harry? Why now? Why this movie? These are the questions driving Hollywood insiders into overdrive. These are the questions that leaked into industry gossip channels, into studio hallways, into private text threads between actors and producers. These are the questions that make this story bigger than a simple casting request. Because Meghan wasn't demanding to include a co-star. She was demanding to include her husband. And that request carries emotional weight. Because whether you admire Meghan or criticize her, whether you believe she's ambitious or misunderstood, whether you think she's reclaiming her identity or reshaping her public persona, one thing is impossible to deny. She is strategic. She understands timing, headlines, optics. And she knew that her acting return would only work if she controlled the narrative around it. But here's the hidden layer to all of this, the part that industry insiders keep hinting at without fully revealing. Meghan wasn't only trying to control her narrative. She was trying to control Harry's. Because after years of documentaries, interviews, memoirs, and media battles, Harry has been struggling to find a stable lane in the public eye. He has been pulled between activism, media production, philanthropic efforts, and attempts to claim space in Hollywood, without any clear identity emerging. His presence has become symbolic, emotional, complicated, which means including him in Meghan's movie wouldn't just be a cameo. It would be a statement, a message to Hollywood, a message to the monarchy, a message to their critics, a message to their supporters, and maybe, just maybe, a message to themselves. A way to anchor their image as a united force rather than a drifting story of two people trying to reinvent themselves in a world that doesn't fully know where to place them. But even if Meghan felt this was the right move, Amazon MGM didn't. Jason Orley didn't. And the team behind Close Personal Friends absolutely didn't. Because the film had a purpose before Meghan made her call. It had a cast. It had a vision. It had a budget. It had momentum. And now, everything felt uncertain. Because once Meghan makes a request, the world pays attention. And once Meghan insists on something involving Harry, the stakes multiply. Studio executives began whispering. Producers started drafting alternative scenarios. PR reps started preparing for potential backlash. This wasn't a polite suggestion. This wasn't a private conversation. This was an inflection point. And the tension spread fast. But the moment everything shifted. The moment that turned this from a surprising celebrity moment into an explosive Hollywood story came at the end of the call, when Meghan allegedly dropped her final line. A line that made Jason Orley realize this wasn't optional. A line that insiders say left him frozen. A line that leaked. But what Meghan said in that final moment, what she revealed about Prince Harry, what she insisted must happen next, that is the moment that changed the movie forever. And that is exactly where the story begins. There are moments in Hollywood where everything feels ordinary. Emails, table reads, last-minute rewrites, until suddenly, without warning, something happens that sucks all the air out of the room. Something that everyone remembers. Something people talk about in whispers even months later. And for director Jason Orley, that moment began with a simple vibration of his phone. He didn't know it yet, but what he was about to hear would mark the beginning of one of the most unusual, tension-filled stretches of his entire career. Here's the part that still makes insiders look at each other with that "can you believe this happened?" expression. Jason almost didn't answer. It was late, he was tired, and he had spent the entire day locked in pitch meetings with Amazon MGM executives who wanted the movie to be funny but grounded, heartfelt but not corny, modern but not cynical. He just wanted silence. A glass of water. A shower. A moment where nobody needed anything from him. But as fate, or chaos, would have it, he answered. And that decision changed everything. The caller ID flashed a number he didn't recognize. Normally, he would have let it go to voicemail. Most directors do. Hollywood is full of unsolicited calls, investors, aspiring actors, people trying to pass along ideas. But something made him pick up. Something instinctive. Something he still can't explain. "Hello," he said, already bracing himself for disappointment. What came next wasn't disappointment. It was shock. "Jason? Hi. It's Meghan. Pause the story here for just a second. Let's ask a question together. What would you do if Meghan Markle suddenly said your name like that? Like she'd known you for years? Like this call was a natural, reasonable thing that absolutely belonged in your schedule? Would you panic? Would your heart skip? Would the back of your neck get hot? Or would you think someone was pranking you?" Jason thought it was a prank. For half a second, he genuinely believed one of his friends was messing with him. His mind raced through possibilities. His assistant, a comedian friend, even an overeager producer trying to lighten the mood. But then she kept talking, and her tone held none of the awkwardness or exaggerated royal family accents a prankster would use. This was Meghan. The Meghan. She didn't waste time. Didn't clear her throat. Didn't ask how he was. She came in with the confidence of someone who had faced millions of cameras, stood beside kings and queens, and walked away from the palace with the entire world watching. "Do you have a moment?" she asked. "Not can I call back later? Not I hope I'm not interrupting. Not I know this is unexpected. Just, do you have a moment?" Insiders say Jason experienced a bizarre swirl of emotions all at once. Flattery, confusion, curiosity, and yes, a small but very real sense of dread. Because when someone like Meghan Markle calls out of nowhere, it's never about something small. It's never about a casual compliment or congratulations. It's always something big. Always something intentional. Always something with consequences. Trying to stay composed, Jason said yes. This is where the tension starts building. Something about Meghan's tone felt rehearsed. Not scripted. Not artificial. But controlled. Carefully measured. Like she had practiced this call in her head multiple times. Like she wasn't going to leave room for doubt or hesitation. "I've been reading about close personal friends," she said. "I heard such wonderful things about the script. Really wonderful. This was polite. This was charming. This was normal." But the normalcy lasted only a few seconds. Because next, Meghan said something that made Jason's stomach tighten. "I think I'd be great for it." A bold line. A confident line. A line that suggested she was already imagining herself in the ensemble cast. Even though, technically, she hadn't auditioned, her agent hadn't reached out, and the studio hadn't included her name in any of their casting conversations so far. And maybe you're thinking, well, what's the problem? Actors call directors all the time. They pitch themselves. They pitch ideas. But here's the important detail you cannot overlook. Meghan Markle is not just any actor. She is a global public figure, a lightning rod for controversy, someone whose mere presence transforms a movie from a quiet comedy into a headline generator. And let's be honest, Meghan doesn't call people directly. Not often. Not without strategy behind it. So if she was calling Jason personally, there was a reason. Jason responded the way any professional director would, carefully, politely, cautiously. He complimented her past work. He mentioned that the studio already had a preliminary cast list. He gently hinted at meetings and approvals. But Meghan wasn't here to be gently hinted at. She pressed. She asked questions. Pointed questions. What kind of ensemble are you envisioning? How flexible is the casting? Are you aiming for recognizable faces or fresh ones? Is the tone more grounded or stylized? Surprisingly, these were good questions. Smart questions. Someone with real acting experience would ask these. Someone who had been in the industry long before the royal world overshadowed her career. For a moment, just a moment, Jason allowed himself to believe this call was about artistry, passion, creative spark. But then Meghan steered the conversation in a direction he didn't expect. A direction that made him sit up straighter. "I'd want to talk about one thing in particular. Someone I think could be a great addition." She said it like a secret she had been holding on to. Jason felt the shift, the tension, the hidden agenda, the quiet heaviness of a conversation that was no longer simply about her interest in the film, but something deeper. He asked the obvious question, "Who do you have in mind?" And here it is. Here is the moment the entire studio later dissected, replayed, analyzed. "My husband," Meghan said. Harry. The room, or rather, the quiet room where Jason sat alone, felt suddenly too small, too bright, too silent. Prince Harry. She wanted Prince Harry in the movie. Imagine being Jason in that moment. Imagine trying to process the layers of ramifications this one request carried. Imagine the mental checklist exploding in his head: budget concerns, contractual issues, narrative consistency, studio approval, media explosion, PR risks, casting logistics. None of it made sense. Harry wasn't an actor. Harry wasn't auditioning. Harry wasn't trained. Harry wasn't even rumored to be pursuing acting. This wasn't just left field. It wasn't even in the same stadium. Jason hesitated. Not long. Just a breath. But Meghan heard it. And insiders say this is where her tone changed. Slightly. Subtly. Not rude. Not aggressive. But firmer. More assertive. More certain of the weight her words carried. "I think it could be really powerful," she said. "Authentic. Unexpected. Something the audience would absolutely love." Audience. Attention. Publicity. Interest. This wasn't simply about acting anymore. This was about impact. And while Meghan framed it as creative insight, Jason saw it for what it was: a request with enormous implications, one that could alter the entire film's identity. He responded carefully. "That's definitely an idea," he said. "But this would require discussions with Amazon, the producers, the whole team. There's a lot involved." Meghan didn't disagree, but she didn't back down either. In fact, according to someone familiar with the director's retelling, Meghan leaned into the request. "He's very open to it," she insisted. "We operate together now, and I think Harry would really enjoy stepping into something fun, something fresh." Operate together. Those two words stuck with Jason, because they didn't just describe a marriage. They described a strategy, a brand, a direction, a calculated effort to realign the public perception of the couple as a united duo, something they had been working to reinforce ever since their split from the royal family. Jason politely reminded her that close personal friends had no character remotely resembling someone Harry could play. Meghan responded with a sentence that stunned him. "You can always write one." And that was it. That was the moment Jason realized this call had passed into territory he had never experienced before. Not even with actors far bigger than Meghan. Not even with executives. Not even with producers who wielded millions in funding. Rewrite the story. Rewrite the characters. Rewrite the movie. Just to include Harry. But that wasn't even the wildest part of the call. Because right when Jason thought the conversation was calming, Meghan added something that insiders still debate today. A line that turned intrigue into tension. A line that shifted this from unusual to explosive. A line that hinted there was something much bigger happening beneath the surface. "Trust me," she said. "You'll want him in this film once you understand why." Why? Why? What reason could Meghan possibly have that would justify rewriting an entire Hollywood production? What secret was she referencing? What motive lay underneath this sudden push to place Harry in a film he never asked to be part of? Jason didn't know, but he felt it. A chill, a worry, a brewing storm. And that storm would only grow from this moment forward. Because what happened next? What Meghan revealed off the record? What Jason confided to his team later? Would flip this story upside down. And no one, absolutely no one, saw it coming. The most shocking part of Meghan Markle's late-night call wasn't that she wanted to be in the movie. It wasn't even that she wanted revisions to the cast strategy. No, the real shock came when she said the name. The one name Jason Orley absolutely did not expect to hear. But before we get to that exact moment, let's rewind a few minutes. Because the build-up matters. The pacing of the conversation matters. The way Meghan approached the topic matters. It reveals intent. It reveals strategy. And it reveals something deeper happening behind the scenes. Right after Meghan confirmed she'd been following progress on close personal friends, she shifted gears. Her tone changed just enough to signal that the conversation was about to go somewhere she needed it to go. "I've been thinking," she said. "There's someone who should really be involved. Someone who could bring something unique to the project." Jason was polite, receptive, curious. Directors like to hear ideas, at least when the ideas come at normal times, through normal channels, not through a personal call that bypasses every studio protocol imaginable. But Meghan wasn't concerned about protocol. She was focused, deliberate. Her voice didn't waver once. Jason later described her tone as unapologetically confident, as if she already knew her suggestion would be approved, as if the entire cast would shift around her vision, as if she believed the project needed her influence as part of its DNA. So Jason asked, "Who do you have in mind?" And that's when she said it. "My husband, Harry." Harry. Think about how strange that moment must have felt. Put yourself in Jason's position again. 1 second, you're discussing creative direction with an actress. The next second, she's making a request that instantly transforms the project into something much bigger, much riskier, and much more chaotic. Let me ask you, how would you react if a major public figure insisted on adding their spouse to a film you've spent months planning without them? Would you be stunned? Would 100 thoughts fire through your mind at once? Because that's exactly what happened to Jason. He froze. Not visibly, not rudely, but internally. Something in his chest tightened. Insiders familiar with the moment say Jason went still, like time paused long enough for him to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. Now here's the important part. Meghan didn't present the idea as a suggestion. She presented it as a decision, a vision, a pivot she believed the film needed, a pivot she expected the team to embrace. He would be a great fit, she continued. He's open to it. And the timing is right. The timing is right. Let's pause on that phrase. What timing? Why now? What changed in Harry's life that made him suddenly open to being in a Hollywood film? This wasn't some charity cameo. This wasn't a documentary segment. This wasn't a digital short with low stakes. This was a multi-million-dollar Amazon MGM production with contractual obligations, union guidelines, creative integrity, and an entire cast already mapped out. Harry had never acted professionally. Harry had never expressed interest in mainstream acting. Harry had never auditioned for anything. So why would Meghan believe he needed to be part of this? What did she know that Jason didn't? What narrative was she trying to shape? These are the kinds of questions that made studio insiders nervous immediately after hearing about the call. Because this wasn't just a Hollywood couple making a creative pitch. This was a former member of the British royal family being positioned to enter a new arena, one that millions of people watch, critique, dissect, and judge. Movies aren't just movies. They're global statements when certain people are involved. And Meghan understood that. The question was, did Jason? At first, he tried the diplomatic approach. "That's an interesting idea," he said, keeping his tone steady. "But the script isn't built around that kind of role. It would be a major shift." Meghan didn't blink. "I know," she replied. "But that's the beauty of it. The beauty. Imagine a director hearing that from someone who hasn't even officially joined the film." Meghan continued before Jason could respond. "The story is about friends, relationships, trust, miscommunication, the whole comedy of how personal worlds collide. Harry brings authenticity to that. A new angle, a new dynamic. On the surface, it sounded flattering, respectful, even smart. But beneath the surface, it exposed something else. Meghan wasn't asking for a cameo. She was asking for integration. She believed Harry belonged inside the story structure itself. She believed including him would elevate the project. She believed it would strengthen the message. But what message? What narrative? What deeper symbolism was she trying to add to a light-hearted ensemble film? Jason tried another gentle reality check. Does Harry want to act? Has he mentioned it to anyone at Amazon? Meghan responded instantly. "Oh yes, he's very open to it. We've talked about it. He's ready to try something fun, something different. We, not Harry, not he's interested, not he's exploring. We've talked about it. We've decided. We operate together." Those small linguistic patterns reveal something crucial about the shift in the Sussex dynamic. Meghan wasn't speaking for herself. She was speaking as a unit, as if the decisions were shared, as if the career paths were intertwined. Was that true? Or was it aspirational? Only Meghan knows. But Jason felt it. The pressure behind the words. The expectation that he would understand the significance of this request without questioning it. He took a slow breath. "Okay," he said, choosing his next words with surgical precision. "But adding someone like Harry would take a lot of coordination. It's not something I can decide on my own." Meghan didn't disagree. Instead, she reframed the conversation in a way that startled him. "You don't need to decide," she said. "You just need to start the conversation." Start the conversation. A simple phrase, but loaded with implication. Start the process. Begin the integration. Move the pieces. Because Meghan didn't expect a yes that night. She expected momentum, forward motion, a signal that her request was already influencing the project. And this is where the power dynamics slip into focus. Regular actors ask for roles. A-list actors negotiate through agents. But Meghan was bypassing the entire chain of authority. This wasn't a request. This was a directive masked as a suggestion, a push disguised as enthusiasm, a strategic pivot presented as a creative idea. But here's where the story thickens. Because after Meghan made the request, something strange happened. She paused, longer than before, long enough that Jason sensed she wasn't finished. And she wasn't. "I should tell you," Meghan said. "There's a reason Harry wants to do this. A personal reason. One I can share once things move forward. A personal reason." This was the moment Jason felt the unmistakable shift, the kind that tells you the story is bigger than the surface-level explanation. Bigger than a simple desire for a new opportunity. You could almost feel the temperature change in the room as he listened. Because when someone says there's a personal reason, it means something emotional is at play. Something urgent. Something hidden. Does it have to do with the royal family? Jason asked, cautiously. Meghan didn't answer immediately. Her silence was telling. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, but sharper. "It has to do with everything." Everything. That one word carried weight. Regret. Reputation. Reinvention. Identity. Healing. Escape. You can fill in the blanks however you want, and one of them is probably correct. Because Harry's life has been a tangle of everything since the moment he stepped away from the palace. Every move he makes becomes a headline. Every choice becomes a debate. Every action becomes a symbol. But Meghan wasn't finished. "Harry wants to show another side of himself," she continued. "Something light. Something relatable. Something human." Now it was clear. This wasn't about a role. It was about redemption, rebranding, reclaiming control. For years, Harry has been defined by documentaries, interviews, memoirs, legal battles, and royal conflicts. Each public appearance carried tension, gravity, seriousness. But a comedy? A fun ensemble film? That would be a reset, a fresh narrative, a weapon against the heaviness of his current public image. And Meghan knew it. So she asked for it. Not through agents, not through the studio, not through a formal pitch, through a direct, personal call. Imagine the weight of that decision. Imagine the pressure on Jason, hearing these words from someone who had the power to change the course of his entire film. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He simply said the only thing he could say in that moment. "I'll think about it." Meghan responded with a line that insiders still quote to this day. "Good. Because once you understand why this matters, you'll want him in the story just as much as I do." And with that, she ended the call. But the conversation was far from over. Because the next morning, everything exploded. Emails, texts, studio alerts, producers demanding answers, executives calling emergency meetings. And the question circulating in every room was the same. What did Meghan mean by why this matters? What personal reason was she hinting at? What did Harry want to show the world? And perhaps the most shocking question of all, did Harry even know Meghan made the call? You'll find out soon. But first, what happened in those immediate hours after the call? What Jason did next? What he told the studio? What they told him? That's the part of the story that detonates everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the movie Meghan Markle wanted so badly to reshape wasn't anything like the world imagined? What if the film she pushed herself into, and pushed Harry toward, wasn't just a comedy, or a comeback, or a chance for reinvention, but something far more symbolic? Because here's the twist almost no one expected. To understand why Meghan insisted on being part of Close Personal Friends, and why she believed Harry needed to be part of it, you have to understand what the film is actually about. And the truth might surprise you. Close Personal Friends wasn't built as a glamorous blockbuster. It wasn't a political drama. It wasn't a gritty biopic. It wasn't even a star-studded rom-com designed to dominate Christmas streaming. It was something far quieter, far more intimate, far more grounded. It was the kind of film that Hollywood rarely gets right anymore. A simple but emotionally layered story about adult relationships, friendship, rivalry, insecurity, identity, and the messy, chaotic reality of trying to stay connected in a world that's constantly pulling people apart. And that's exactly why Meghan was drawn to it. But let's start at the beginning. The script, long before Meghan's name had ever circulated among studio executives, was praised for one thing: honesty. It had humor, yes. It had charm. It had warmth. But beneath all of that was honesty. Authentic, uncomfortable honesty. It explored the idea of how friends can drift apart without realizing it, how loyalties shift, how success can separate people just as easily as it can bind them, how secrets, resentments, and misunderstandings quietly build until someone, finally, forces a confrontation. Does that ring a bell? Does that sound eerily familiar? Because whether you like Meghan Markle or despise her, whether you support Prince Harry's choices or criticize every one of them, whether you believe the Sussexes left the royal family for freedom or for fame, one thing is undeniable. Their lives have been defined by fractured relationships, family tensions, public fallouts, loyalty wars, emotional exits, long friendships that soured under the spotlight, calls from people they once trusted turning into headlines, miscommunication transforming into global drama. Close personal friends wasn't written about them, but parts of it may as well have been. And that's where this chapter begins, with the eerie overlap between fiction and Meghan's reality. The script follows a tight-knit group of friends whose lives were once perfectly aligned, until one of them becomes famous. Not royal-level famous, not global icon famous, but famous enough that schedules shift, priorities change, and the group dynamic becomes unbalanced. The famous friend tries to stay grounded. The others try to stay understanding. But pressure creeps in anyway. Expectations warp. Old jokes hit differently. Insecurity grows like moss on the edges of every conversation. Sound familiar yet? Hollywood insiders who reviewed early drafts said the film felt deceptively light, meaning it carried deeper emotional undercurrents beneath its comedic surface. And those undercurrents revolved around one central question: how do you stay connected to people when the world insists on pulling you in opposite directions? Now think about that question. Think about Meghan's life. Think about Harry's life. Think about the royal family, the media, the friendships that disappeared, the ties that frayed, the alliances that shifted, the relationships that were never repaired. So when Meghan read the script, because yes, she did read it thoroughly, she didn't just see a comedy. She saw a mirror. She saw themes that echoed her life. She saw conflicts that felt familiar. She saw emotional beats that aligned with her and Harry's public journey. That's why she believed she could bring authenticity to the role. That's why she believed Harry could add a human element. That's why she insisted their partnership fit the narrative. Because in her mind, this wasn't a film. It was a metaphor. And she wanted to be inside that metaphor, shaping it, influencing it, using it as a platform to communicate something to the world that interviews, documentaries, and podcasts had never quite captured. But here's where things get more complicated. Because Meghan didn't just see herself in the script. She saw Harry. More specifically, she saw what she wanted Harry to become. Let me explain. One of the major characters in Close Personal Friends is a man whose identity has been swallowed by a past he never fully processed. He's not villainous. He's not destructive. But he's stuck, caught between who he used to be, who the world expects him to be, and who he secretly wants to become. He's lost. He's searching. He's misunderstood. And for anyone who has watched Prince Harry over the last few years, watched him shift from royal to storyteller, from soldier to speaker, from prince to podcaster, it's impossible not to see parallels. The character is someone trying to rebuild himself while the world debates whether he's doing it wrong. Does that sound familiar? This is why Meghan pushed for Harry's involvement. Not because she wanted him to be an actor, not because she thought he could carry a role, not because it would be fun or unexpected or cute. She wanted him to find a character he could connect to. She wanted him to explore a version of himself without the weight of royal expectations. She wanted him to try something where he wasn't judged for being Prince Harry, just for being human. Whether that was fair or unfair to Harry is another story. But to Meghan, this film represented an emotional outlet, a safe place, a symbolic rebirth. But here's the part no one saw coming. Meghan wasn't the only one who saw the symbolism. The studio saw it too, and they didn't like it. Because movies aren't metaphors for the people inside them. Movies are products, investments, calculated risks. They can't be restructured to fit the emotional needs of the actors. Especially not actors who are brand new. Especially not actors whose names trigger global debate. Especially not actors connected to the British monarchy. But Meghan wasn't thinking like a studio. She was thinking like a storyteller. She was thinking like someone who wanted to infuse a personal narrative into a cinematic space. Let's step back for a moment and ask an important question. Why did Meghan think this film was the perfect place to insert Harry into Hollywood? Why this film? Why this director? Why this moment? Insiders have one theory: relatability. Close personal friends wasn't flashy. It wasn't elitist. It wasn't dripping with royalty or glamour or pomp. It was about ordinary people facing ordinary problems. For Meghan, who has been criticized for being out of touch, this was the chance to reclaim relatability. For Harry, who has been criticized for being directionless, this was the chance to rediscover purpose. But the biggest reason, according to a source close to the production, is something far more personal. Meghan wanted to control the narrative of their relationship. She wanted to show the world a version of Meghan and Harry that was natural, funny, accessible, emotional, vulnerable, human. But here's the contradiction. The more Meghan attempted to create a relatable image through controlled environments, the less relatable she became. She wanted authenticity, but she wanted to write it. She wanted vulnerability, but she wanted to rehearse it. She wanted humanity, but she wanted to curate it. This is why Jason Orley felt uneasy. He knew that injecting real-life royal drama into a fictional comedy would warp the film. It would overshadow every scene. It would dominate press coverage. It would turn a grounded ensemble story into a global circus. And yet, Meghan didn't see it that way. She saw opportunity. She saw symbolism. She saw healing. She saw a narrative arc that paralleled her own. The problem? Movie studios aren't therapists. They're businesses. So when Meghan framed Harry's involvement as something emotionally meaningful, Jason felt the weight of it. And for the first time, he began to realize that this project wasn't just a career moment for Meghan. It was a personal mission, a reconstruction, a reclamation. But here's where the real twist comes in. The deeper Meghan connected herself to the film, the more it threatened to break apart everything the studio had already built. Because emotional storytelling works in documentaries. It works in interviews. It works in memoirs. But in a scripted comedy, it complicates everything. And that complication would soon become the first major point of conflict between Meghan and Amazon MGM. But before that battle erupted, something else happened. Something that shocked the studio even more than Meghan's request to include Harry. Something that hinted at a deeper tension behind the scenes. Something that would make Jason Orley question whether Meghan understood the true consequences of what she was asking for. It was something the studio never expected her to say. And once she said it, the entire production knew that this situation was spiraling faster than anyone imagined. Because Meghan wasn't just asking to join the film. She was asking to reshape its soul. But what came next would force the studio to respond. And no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for the fallout. There is a specific kind of silence that falls inside a Hollywood studio when someone says, Meghan Markle wants rewrites. It's not the amused silence that follows a diva request. It's not the irritated silence that follows a pointless note from a producer who hasn't read the script. It's not even the panicked silence that follows news of a budget crisis. No, it's a heavier silence. A silence that feels like a warning. A silence that seems to whisper, this could change everything. And that's exactly the silence that swept through Amazon MGM when word began circulating that Meghan Markle, yes, Meghan Markle, had not only called Jason Orley unexpectedly, but had hinted at the need for changes. Not small changes. Not dialogue tweaks. Not comedic punch-ups. Rewrites. And here's the part that shocked the executives most. She hadn't even been officially cast. Let that sink in for a moment. An actor who isn't in the film, hasn't auditioned, hasn't gone through the formal channels, and hasn't received a contract, is already asking for the script to be reshaped. Can you imagine? Let me ask you directly. If you were running a multi-million-dollar studio project, how would you react? Would you say yes? Would you laugh? Would you slam your hand on the table and ask who authorized this? Because all three reactions allegedly happened inside Amazon MGM. But that internal chaos came after the initial warning, a warning that had already been quietly circulating long before Meghan picked up the phone. Several insiders had advised her, directly or indirectly, that close personal friends might not be the ideal space for her Hollywood comeback, mostly for three reasons. 1. The film's tone required subtlety, restraint, and ensemble harmony, none of which mesh well with global fame and heavy public scrutiny. 2. The story was grounded and intimate, and adding a polarizing global figure could disrupt its emotional balance. 3. Hollywood, especially major studios, is still wary of Meghan's brand. Not because she can't act, but because the public conversation around her is explosive. But Meghan didn't see caution. She saw opportunity. She saw a story that felt symbolic. She saw a role that mirrored her internal narrative. And she saw a script that could become something even more powerful if it was adjusted to match the message she wanted to communicate. This is where the tension begins. Not with the phone call, not with the pacing, not with the request itself. The real tension starts here, with what the insiders call the misalignment of intentions. Jason Orley had written a film about ordinary people trying to maintain friendships in a messy, modern world. Meghan wanted to turn that film into something more reflective of her and Harry's journey. But here's the conflict. Hollywood doesn't bend around personal reinvention arcs unless they're carefully planned, studio-approved, and backed by major creative teams. You can't just rewrite a movie because the themes resonate with your real life. But Meghan felt differently. Sources say she spoke with a calm certainty, a self-assured tone, a belief that her creative insight could elevate the story. One staffer who overheard part of the reaction from Orley after the call described it like this. It was like she had already decided what the movie was supposed to be, even though she hadn't been part of any creative meeting. She talked like she already belonged. And this wasn't arrogance, at least not in the traditional Hollywood sense. It was conviction. The conviction of someone who has spent years controlling her own narrative, shaping her public persona, and battling every negative headline with strategic messaging. She wasn't being dramatic. She was being purposeful. But purpose can clash hard with professional boundaries. And that clash was about to explode. Because the film Meghan wanted to influence wasn't meant to be influenced by her. Close Personal Friends was a grounded dramedy. A warm, character-driven story with dry humor and emotional tenderness. It centered on friendships drifting apart, reconnecting, discovering hidden resentments, and healing long-standing wounds. It was the opposite of royal spectacle, the opposite of celebrity culture, the opposite of polished image-making. It was, ironically, the very thing Meghan craved, authenticity. But here's the contradiction that insiders kept pointing out. Every time Meghan tries to reconnect with authenticity, she does it through curation, through production, through careful storytelling, through control, through structure. Even her documentary, her interviews, her public appearances, they all carried a tightly managed tone. This film, however, didn't need control. It needed vulnerability. It needed imperfection. It needed raw, unscripted emotional truth presented through fictional characters. And that's a mode Meghan struggles with, because her reality has never been simple enough to detach from. But she didn't see the conflict. She only saw potential. One insider said Meghan had been captivated by the intimacy of the script precisely because it allowed her to explore emotional beats she hadn't touched since leaving the royal family. Beats involving friendship, loyalty, betrayal, vulnerability, and reconnection. It was almost therapeutic. But Amazon MGM? They weren't looking for therapy. They were looking for a film. And when Meghan spoke to Jason Orley, she crossed a line Hollywood guards fiercely: creative hierarchy. Actors don't rewrite scripts. Not before casting. Not before contracts. Not before a studio greenlights changes. But Meghan wasn't thinking like an actor. She was thinking like a producer, like a curator, like someone used to shaping her own story in every environment she enters. Jason, already struggling to process her request to include Harry, felt another shift when she casually mentioned the idea of rewriting a few character arcs. She suggested adding scenes that emphasized emotional healing, reframing conflicts to highlight modern forms of communication breakdown, adjusting dialogue to reflect themes of reinvention, identity, and public perception, adding a new dynamic, one mirrored by Meghan and Harry's real-life story. Two people battling the pressures of outside judgment while trying to remain unified. It wasn't blunt. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't aggressive. It was persuasive, thought out, passionate, almost poetic. She spoke with the cadence of someone who believed she had something unique to contribute. And yet, this was still completely outside Hollywood norms. When Jason recounted the call to his producers hours later, he described Meghan's suggestions as not unreasonable, but absolutely impractical. Why? Because rewrites aren't just about changing scenes. They change budgets. They change scheduling. They change cast balance. They change shooting locations. They change narrative cohesion. They change everything. And the studio wasn't about to reshape a film that had been approved, budgeted, and nearly finalized, just because someone famous resonated with it emotionally. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Meghan was not the first celebrity to request rewrites on a film. She wasn't the first to offer creative suggestions. She wasn't the first to push for structural changes. But she was the first celebrity in a long time to do so before she was involved in any official capacity. And that made everyone uneasy, because it hinted at something deeper. She wasn't trying to join the film. She was trying to own it, at least creatively. Jason understood this instinctively. He had worked with actors who wanted creative input. He had worked with producers who pushed notes on every scene. He had worked with studios that insisted on changes to appeal to mass audiences. But none of them felt like this. Meghan's suggestions were emotional, not strategic. Personal, not commercial. Symbolic, not structural. That kind of input doesn't fit easily into a traditional Hollywood mold. And Jason knew, instantly, that the more Meghan believed in these thematic overlaps, the harder it would be to keep the film rooted in its original purpose. But the real problem wasn't Meghan's passion. It was the fact that Meghan believed she was helping, when in reality, her involvement risked derailing the entire production before it even began. Because studios fear three things above all: uncertainty, controversy, uncontrollable narrative shifts. Meghan represented all three. One producer allegedly said, "If we rewrite the script for her before she's even cast, we lose control of the movie. And once control is gone, so is the budget." But Meghan didn't know any of this yet. All she knew was that the script resonated with her in a deeply personal way, and she believed, truly believed, that her presence could deepen the emotional impact. That's why she didn't hesitate to mention rewrites. She didn't think she was demanding. She didn't think she was overwhelming. She didn't think she was crossing a boundary. She thought she was contributing. Jason, however, heard something else. He heard the beginning of a conflict. He heard the start of a negotiation nobody in the studio had prepared for. He heard an actress pushing into producer territory before she even had a foot in the door. And that terrified him. Because the film was fragile. Not narratively, emotionally. It needed cohesion, balance, care, precision. It wasn't built to survive public spectacle. It wasn't built to absorb celebrity controversy. It wasn't built to be rewritten by someone whose personal story threatened to overshadow the fiction. But the real shock came when insiders learned what Meghan said next, something that hinted she wasn't done shaping the film. Because rewrites were just the beginning. Her next request? Her next suggestion? Her next demand? That was the moment studio executives realized they were dealing with something much bigger than a casting inquiry. Much bigger than a creative input conversation. And much riskier than any of them anticipated. Because Meghan didn't want to just rewrite scenes. She wanted to reshape the film's emotional core. And what she asked for next would ignite the first major battle between her team and Amazon MGM. A battle no one, absolutely no one, saw coming. What would you do if someone who wasn't even part of your film started requesting script rewrites? Not small revisions. Not minor notes. Not simple adjustments. Full rewrites. Entire scene restructuring. Tone shifts. Character changes. Themes modified. Would you laugh? Would you panic? Would you think it was a joke? Or would you sit there, stunned, realizing a storm was forming before your eyes? Because that's exactly what happened the moment Meghan Markle moved from suggesting involvement to requesting creative changes. And insiders say that when she reached this part of the call, her voice changed, becoming firmer, clearer, more certain. She wasn't asking. She was proposing with the energy of someone who believed she belonged in the driver's seat. But the studio wasn't ready for that. Jason Orley wasn't prepared for it. And absolutely no one expected the next part of Meghan's pitch, the part that pushed this entire situation into dangerous territory. Because for Meghan, the rewrites weren't optional. They were necessary. Let's rewind. After suggesting Harry should be added to the film, and after hinting that the film needed to reflect certain emotional undertones, Meghan began detailing specific changes she wanted to see in the script. And this wasn't vague brainstorming. No, she came armed with ideas, notes, beats, and lines she felt needed to shift. According to sources familiar with the private retelling, Meghan began with a soft transition, almost easing Jason into what she was about to drop. "I think the script has a lot of heart," she said. "But I believe there are ways to make it resonate even more." This is the kind of language executives hear from producers, not actors, and certainly not from people who haven't even been hired. But Meghan didn't hesitate. She talked about expanding the emotional arcs. She talked about deepening the character relationships. She talked about reframing certain conflicts to highlight themes of misunderstanding and emotional healing. Nothing outrageous on its own. But then she took a turn. She shifted into what one insider described as an unexpected level of narrative ownership. She said the film could benefit from a storyline about reinvention. She said audiences connect with characters who face public pressure. She said the movie could reflect how personal narratives get distorted by outside voices. And this is where Jason realized something critical. Meghan wasn't just reading the script. She was projecting onto it. She was stitching pieces of her own life into its fabric. Because the themes she was highlighting weren't random. Reinvention, public pressure, private truth versus public perception, misunderstanding between loved ones, reclaiming identity after major life changes. These weren't just themes of the film. These were themes of Meghan Markle's life. And the longer she talked, the clearer it became. She wasn't just moved by the script, she identified with it. Deeply, personally, emotionally. In her mind, the movie reflected her story. But that's where the danger lies. Because anytime a public figure sees themselves too clearly in a fictional narrative, that fiction risks becoming distorted, warped, bent toward a specific interpretation. And when Meghan asked for rewrites, she wasn't asking for small improvements. She was asking the story to align with a message. Her message, her perspective, her emotional arc. Now let's ask an important question. Does that make Meghan manipulative or human? Does it make her self-centered or self-aware? Does it make her disruptive or visionary? The truth depends on where you stand. Some insiders say Meghan genuinely believed she could improve the film. Others say she wanted to rewrite it as a metaphor for her own journey. Others say she saw the film as a platform to reshape her public image. And a few say she wanted to create space for Harry's involvement, even if it required restructuring the film. But the fact remains, her requests were unprecedented, and they created instant shockwaves inside Amazon MGM. When Jason recounted the conversation to his producers hours later, one of them responded with a single, stunned question. How many pages does she want rewritten? Nobody had an answer, because Meghan didn't outline page numbers. She outlined ideas. Ideas that touched half the script. Ideas that shifted tone. Ideas that changed relationships. Ideas that altered arcs. Ideas that added themes the director had intentionally avoided to keep the film light. But the most controversial idea? Meghan wanted a character added. Not Harry. Not yet. Not directly. She wanted a character inspired by someone familiar with public reinvention. A character who sounded suspiciously like her. This wasn't stated outright. Meghan was far too smart to say something so obvious. But the implication was unmistakable. She wanted a woman in the story who had undergone a transformation. Someone misunderstood. Someone trying to rebuild old friendships. Someone navigating complex public expectations. One producer later called this character Meghan Light. But this suggestion wasn't the explosive part. Not yet. The explosive part came next. Because after suggesting the addition of this new character, Meghan said something that caused everyone in the room listening to Jason's recounting to freeze. She said, "It would be helpful if the character had a partner who supports her journey." And then she added, almost lightly, "That could be where Harry fits." This line, this exact sentence. This was the moment the studio realized Meghan wasn't imagining a cameo. She was imagining a storyline, a parallel arc, a reflection of her and Harry's real relationship embedded into the film. a fictionalized reenactment of their joint public journey. And that was impossible. Close Personal Friends was not a biographical drama. It was not a symbolic exploration of public figures. It was not designed to carry the emotional weight of Meghan and Harry's lives. But Meghan didn't see the boundaries. She saw opportunity. She saw narrative potential. She saw a chance to create emotional resonance. And the problem wasn't that her ideas were bad. The problem was that they were incompatible. Movies can be about friendship without being about celebrity. Movies can explore reinvention without being about royals. Movies can touch on public perception without becoming PR pieces. Jason knew this. The studio knew this. The writers knew this. But Meghan didn't seem to realize how heavy her presence was. Any film she touched, especially after the last 5 years, became political, became symbolic, became controversial, became dissected, became debated. Close Personal Friends was never meant to carry that weight. And yet, she kept pushing. She said the story felt personal. She said she connected deeply with certain parts. She said the film opened a door to something meaningful. And this is where the first real panic started at Amazon MGM. Because if Meghan joined the film and the script didn't change, people would accuse the studio of exploiting her story. But if Meghan joined the film and the script did change, people would accuse her of rewriting a movie to comfort her ego. Either way, the film would become a lightning rod. But Meghan wasn't thinking about the lightning. She was thinking about the message. And she had one more request, one the studio considered the most dangerous of all. I think the film needs space for the couple dynamic, she said. Modern couples navigating outside pressure together. It's relatable, and audiences want that. Modern couples. Outside pressure. Navigating challenges. Meghan didn't say us. But she didn't need to. Her meaning was clear. She wanted the film to echo her life, to reflect her real marriage, to mirror her real struggles, to dramatize her real pressures, and to include Harry in the process. This wasn't about acting anymore. This was about storytelling control, narrative ownership, reinvention through fiction, healing through art. But Hollywood doesn't heal through art. It sells through art. And suddenly, everyone realized something terrifying. Meghan didn't just want rewrites. She wanted reinvention. For herself. For Harry. For their joint public image. And that kind of request, that kind of pressure, that kind of influence, it demands consequences. And those consequences arrived quickly. Because after Meghan suggested reshaping the script in her image, after she implied Harry should be woven into the couple arc, after she pushed for emotional reinvention themes, Jason Orley made a decision. A decision that set off a chain reaction inside Amazon MGM. A decision that changed everything. A decision that would lead directly to the biggest confrontation of the entire production. Because what Meghan asked for next, what she hinted at behind her carefully chosen words, what she implied with her creative vision, was something the studio could not ignore. And what they discovered in the days after that call would shake the film to its core. What if everything Meghan Markle requested, every rewrite, every narrative tweak, every emotional shift she wanted the film to make, wasn't actually about her? What if she wasn't trying to reshape Close Personal Friends to fit her own reinvention arc, but instead was trying to reshape it for someone else? Because here's the twist almost no one saw coming. Meghan wasn't just advocating for herself. She was advocating for Harry. And according to insiders close to the situation, everything she pushed for, the couple dynamic, the reinvention theme, the emotional healing, the idea of navigating public pressure, wasn't about giving herself a perfect role. It was about giving Harry a lifeline. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This chapter begins the moment Meghan's advisors learned what she had said to Jason Orley, and their reaction was nothing like hers. Meghan was energized after the call, passionate, optimistic. She believed she had offered valuable creative input. She believed she had opened a path not just for her return to acting, but for Harry's entrance into Hollywood in a way that felt meaningful, symbolic, and healing. Yet while she felt empowered, her advisors felt terrified. One PR strategist who works with high-profile clients in Los Angeles reportedly reacted with a single, blunt line. She did what? Another advisor, a crisis management expert who has worked with celebrities navigating public backlash, had a more dramatic response. She can't push like this. She can't be seen controlling a project she's not even in yet. This is going to blow back.